You speak with honesty. You make decisions with integrity. And still, they look at you like you're cold, detached, arrogant, too much, or maybe too different. You try to explain, to clarify, to soften the edges of your truth just to be received more easily. But somehow, it only makes the gap wider. And in quiet moments you start to wonder, maybe something's wrong with me. Maybe I'm just hard to understand. But what if the real problem isn't that they don't understand you? It's that you believe they should? Here's the truth. Being deeply misunderstood doesn't mean you're flawed. It often means you're more grounded than most are ready to see. Welcome to True Stoic Mindset, where we don't water ourselves down to be accepted. We refine ourselves to be aligned. In this video, we'll break the need to be understood and show you how the Stoics found power, not pain, in being different. We'll explore why your greatest freedom begins the moment you stop needing the world to get you. Because when you no longer seek permission to be yourself, that's when you truly begin to live. The illusion of being understood, what we're really chasing. Why do we crave to be understood so deeply? Because on the surface, it looks like a simple desire. To be seen. To be heard. To be known. But beneath it lies something more fragile. The fear of being alone in our truth. We think, if they don't understand me, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't belong. Maybe I'm not worthy. So we explain. We adjust. We try to make our values, our boundaries, our very essence more palatable, more relatable. But here's what the Stoics saw clearly. This need to be understood is not about truth, it's about ego. It's the ego that wants to be validated, to be mirrored back perfectly by others, to be praised not just for who we are, but for how easily we can be accepted. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Because the moment you prioritize being understood, you risk betraying yourself to fit the mold. And the deeper irony? The more you chase understanding, the less understood you feel. Why? Because you've placed your peace in someone else's perception. And that perception is never yours to control. The Stoics didn't seek to be understood. They sought to be unchangeable in principle. No matter who understood them, or didn't. That's the shift we'll make next. Even the Stoics were misunderstood, and they didn't care. Think the great Stoics were always respected? Understood? Admired? Far from it. Marcus Aurelius was seen by many in Rome as distant. Too philosophical. Too calm. In a world driven by power and spectacle, his stillness was viewed as weakness. Seneca, despite his brilliance, was mocked for being too rich to be wise. They ignored his letters, twisted his intentions, doubted his sincerity. And Epictetus? A crippled former slave teaching emperors how to live? To many, he was a joke. A pretender. An outsider. But none of them tried to correct the narrative. Why? Because they understood this unshakable truth. Being misunderstood is not a problem, unless your identity depends on being understood. Marcus didn't write meditations to explain himself. He wrote to strengthen himself. To remember that truth doesn't need applause. Virtue doesn't require an audience. They didn't chase clarity from the crowd. They found clarity in character. And character doesn't bend to perception. So next time someone misreads you, calls you too intense, too quiet, too honest, ask yourself, do I live for their approval, or for my own alignment? Because once you stop trying to manage how others see you, you gain the space to become who you truly are. And that, the Stoics knew, was far more important than being liked. What happens when you make being understood the goal? It starts small. You adjust your tone so people don't think you're too harsh. You soften your words so they don't label you arrogant. You hold back your truth so they feel comfortable. But one small compromise becomes another, and another, until one day you realize you're not misunderstood anymore. You're just unrecognizable to yourself. When being understood becomes your goal, you begin to shapeshift. Not from growth, but from fear. You start seeking approval in every sentence. You watch reactions like a hawk. You rehearse how to say what's true in a way that won't upset the room. And yet, the paradox remains. The more you filter yourself to be understood, the more disconnected you feel. Because deep down you know, you're not living your values. You're performing them. And the soul always knows when it's pretending. The Stoics refused to let perception dictate authenticity. They didn't fear being misunderstood. They feared betraying their principles just to be accepted. So ask yourself this: am I speaking my truth? Or am I diluting it to make sure I'm understood? Because if understanding comes at the cost of your integrity, it's too expensive. In the next section, we'll see the alternative. Living in alignment, even when no one claps. Choose alignment over agreement. Imagine this. You walk into a room full of people. No one gets you. Your ideas are met with silence. Your values are met with resistance. Now here's the question. Do you adjust to earn their agreement? Or do you stay centered and remain aligned? Most people chase agreement because it feels like validation, like safety, like belonging. But agreement is temporary. It shifts with moods, opinions, and popularity. Alignment, on the other hand, is unshakable. It's when your actions reflect your principles. When you live the same in silence as you do in the spotlight. When your values aren't for display, they're your foundation. The Stoics chose alignment. Every time. They understood that agreement with the world is never guaranteed. But alignment with yourself? That's a choice you make daily. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to convince Rome. He wrote to remind himself to live with discipline, justice, and truth. Even when no one applauded. Seneca taught that the wise person is not disturbed by disagreement, because he knows that truth doesn't require consensus. It requires consistency. When you prioritize agreement, you outsource your peace. But when you prioritize alignment, you reclaim it. So the next time someone says, "I just don't get you," try answering, "That's okay. I'm not living to be decoded. I'm living to be aligned." And here's the paradox. Often, the moment you stop needing agreement, people begin to respect you more. Why? Because conviction, even when misunderstood, is magnetic. When silence says more than explanation ever could, there's a moment, after you've been misunderstood, criticized, or questioned, when every part of you wants to jump in and fix it, to explain, to defend, to clear your name. But the Stoic response isn't to react. It's to restrain. Not out of weakness, but out of mastery. Because silence, when chosen with intention, is one of the most powerful statements you can make. It says, "I know who I am. I don't owe you a performance. My peace is worth more than your approval." Marcus Aurelius never raced to respond to gossip. He knew, you are not required to answer every opinion. You are only required to answer to your conscience. In a world where everyone is performing, explaining, justifying, reacting, the person who stands still becomes a signal, a presence. Let others argue. Let them project. You don't have to attend every battle you're invited to, especially the ones that cost your focus, your clarity, your energy. Because silence isn't absence. It's presence sharpened. And sometimes, when words would only tangle truth, stillness says it all. In the next part, we'll explore how to build a life so clear, so anchored, that it no longer needs to be explained. Build a life that doesn't need to be understood. What if your life could explain itself? No captions. No disclaimers. No need to convince anyone of your worth, your choices, your direction. Just clarity. Lived. Silently. Consistently. Powerfully. The Stoics never cared for public image. They cared for inner architecture. Building a life of integrity, brick by brick. Whether or not anyone applauded. Because when you live with intention, you stop needing permission. You don't explain why you wake up early. You don't defend your decision to walk away from the crowd. You don't feel guilty for protecting your time, your energy, your standards. Why? Because your results begin to speak louder than your reasoning. Your steadiness becomes its own language. Epictetus taught, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. In a world addicted to being seen, there's something sacred about someone who just lives. Who doesn't need to correct every misconception. Who doesn't shrink their truth to fit into someone else's comfort zone. Who walks a path that may be lonely, but never lost. So build that kind of life. A life that earns respect without asking for it. That radiates conviction without explanation. That doesn't need to be understood. Because it's too aligned to be shaken. In the final part, we'll embrace the idea that being misunderstood might not be your problem, but your greatest liberation. They'll never fully understand you, and that's your freedom. Let this truth settle deep. They'll never fully understand you, your path, your silence, your standards, your battles. And that's not a problem to solve. It's a freedom to embrace. Because when you stop expecting the world to get you, you stop bending to be seen. You stop over-explaining to be accepted. You stop editing yourself to fit into small minds. The Stoics didn't chase understanding. They chased alignment. They knew, when you live with truth, misunderstanding is a cost you pay. But peace is the reward you keep. So let them misread you. Let them assume. Let them build stories you never told. Meanwhile, you build a life they can't shake. A code they can't rewrite. A soul they can't mold. You don't need to be understood. You need to be free. And freedom, real freedom, begins the moment you stop performing for the crowd and start living for the truth. If this message grounded you, subscribe to True Stoic Mindset. Because you're not alone on this path. You're just walking ahead. With purpose. And that's exactly where you belong.